I used to live with my grandma and grandpa when I was young. I was raised by them.
And there's Nancy Reagan on the television.
Okay. Um, I used to live with my grandma and grandpa when I was young. I was raised by them, so I lived with them. It was a one-bedroom old house built like 1930s, I think. So really, everyone kind of like slept everywhere in that house, and it was three of us that slept in the front part of the duplex. My grandma wasn't home, and it was just me and my grandpa that night. And I was watching TV in the living room, and I heard a noise at the door. And this was late. This was like, well, it was late for a kid because I was like maybe 9 to 11 years old. And I was at an age where it was like you need to tell an adult something when things happen. It wasn't like, oh, I'm grown like a teenager or something. No, I was still a child. So I went to the door and I looked outside, and there was this guy. He was drunk. He was like mumbling and he was shaking the door. I couldn't understand what he's saying. I assumed he was drunk because I lived with a drunk, so I knew what a drunk looked like. And I was like, hey, grandpa, alguien está afuera. Quiere meter adentro. And he's like, what? Yeah, I go, can you go look? I go, he's just shaking. Can you go look? And he said, yeah, he's shaking the door. So he went, and then he's, talking to him like, what do you want? He's like, I want to come in. He's like, no, you can't come in. And so next thing you know, I hear my grandpa telling me, hey, habla la policía, habla la policía. And I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, okay, he's telling me to call the police. It's got to be serious. So I'm, I'm on the phone scared because I'm young. I'm a child. I'm scared. And I'm like, all right, call 911. Hey, what's your emergency? Oh, wait, what? There's somebody trying to break in. What? I don't know. My grandpa's trying to fight him off right now. He's trying to get into the front door. He won't go away. We don't know what to do. And it's okay, we're going to send somebody there. Next thing you know, there's like, you can hear sirens, and within a couple of minutes I already heard sirens, like, oh great. And then it was a helicopter just like circling around my house. And I'm over here hiding. There's nowhere to hide because it's like I said, it's a one-bedroom house. There's really nowhere to hide. Like, we don't even have enough closets. Like, they were all full of crap because my grandma was a hoarder. And the bathroom too, it's not necessarily like I can hide in there. So I was pretty scared. So like, oh my god, what if I die? So I stopped. I didn't hear any commotion. I was like, grandpa, on this das, on this das. And then I'm listening, trying to listen for him because I don't hear him anymore. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Dude, I go out there. They're sitting on the porch talking. I'm like, what? What happened? Apparently, the drunk guy lives across the street. He lives on the street before my grandma's house, but it's like the same house. It faces the same way. It faces the street, I guess. Yeah. Like I don't know, west, north, whatever. He thought our house was his house. He was that drunk. And he didn't know that he was trying to get into a house that was not his. And my grandpa just sat there and talked to him. And that was it. That was it. It was so stupid.
So when I was young, I lived with my grandma and grandpa because I was raised by them. And we lived in this old house that was built in like the 1930s, and it was one of those houses where people just kind of slept everywhere. But in the front of the duplex, there was just three of us. And one night, my grandma wasn't home, so it was just me and my grandpa. And I'm young, like between 9 or 11, and I'm just sitting there watching TV, and I hear this noise at the door. And because I was so young, it was that age where like you got to tell an adult. It wasn't like I was grown like a teenager or something. I had to tell an adult when I heard something. So I went to check it out, and I just hear this. I hear this, rustling at the door, and I look outside, and there's this guy. And he's just mumbling, and he's drunk. I know he's drunk because I live with a drunk. So I tell my grandma or tell my grandpa in Spanish, like, what do I do? What do I do? And my grandpa goes up to figure out what's going on, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? Get out of here! Get out of here! And all of a sudden, my grandpa tells me, call the police. I was like, oh, my grandpa's telling me to call the police. It must be serious. So, I call the police and tell them, there's a man trying to break into my house. And while I'm on the phone, I start hearing sirens. And I I look outside and there's a helicopter. They brought a helicopter to my house. It's crazy. So I'm scared at this point. I think, I don't want to die. I think I need to go hide. But like I said, it's a really small house. There's not really many places to hide. We don't have enough closets. They're all full of shit because, my grandma's a hoarder. And it's not like I'm not going to hide in the bathroom. So, I'm scared. I'm young. I don't want to die. So all of a sudden, I don't hear my grandpa anymore. I'm like, what's going on, Grandpa? What's going on? So I walk up to the door. I don't really hear anything. And I walk outside, and you know what? They're just sitting there talking. He's talking to him. What turns out that this guy, he lives like across the street or like one street over from my grandma's house, and his house like faces the same way, northeast, whatever. Basically, he thought he was going into his own house. He was that drunk. So my grandpa just sat there and talked to him. That's it. That's it. So stupid.
Alright, so I'm a young kid. I'm living with my whole family. My grandma and grandpa live with me. And I'm like 9, 10, 11, something like that. And everyone's asleep in the house, but I'm still up because I'm young. I'm like, oh, they don't know I'm not asleep. And they're asleep, but I'm chilling. Oh man. And I start hearing this noise outside the front door. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. Like, I'm not about to go into that because I'm a young kid, so I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm scared. I'm really scared. And so I go and look out the window, and I'm like, what is that? And there's this guy out there. He's stumbling around. I'm pretty sure he's drunk. I'm a young kid, but I have a keen eye for drunkenness because of my family. They drink. And so I'm like, oh, well, I'm not about to mess with any of this. So I go and wake up my grandpa. I'm like, Grandpa. Grandpa. I'm like, dude, this guy's outside. What's going on? And he's like, call the cops now. Call the cops. And he's like, I'll scope it out, but you call the cops right now. I was like, all right, okay. So I call the cops, and, the cops, like, they're real quick, right? They get out there on the scene, and they even call a helicopter on the scene. There's a helicopter going on outside. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. What's going on? And I'm inside the house. I go and hide because I'm so scared. I go and hide in a closet. Even though my grandma's like a hoarder, like, I still was able to squeeze my way in there, and I was like, this seems like a pretty safe space. And there's like a couple minutes pass, and the ruckus kind of dies down, and I'm like sitting there like, oh, okay, this is anticlimactic. What's happening? And so I kind of slowly go outside, and then I look out the window again, and I see my grandpa's out there talking to the guy. What? What are you doing? So I peek my head out the door, and then it turns out I overhear the conversation. It turns out the guy lives like a street over, and his house is like kind of faced the same way as our house. So he was so drunk that he thought he got to his house. Classic. So dumb.
Okay, so this story happens when I'm young. I'm like 9, 10, 11 or something like that. And I was like a super cool kid, but I lived with my whole family. My mom, my dad, even my grandparents lived with me. So this one time, like, it's night and everyone starts to go to sleep, but I'm a cool kid. So I'm like, I'm not asleep. I'm going to stay up. And all of a sudden I hear this noise, and I'm like, what is that? And it's totally freaked me out because I'm a young kid, So, like, I run over to the window and I peek out, and there's this guy, and he's like, and he's like drunk, and he's walking around the yard, and I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? But I recognize it's a drunk dude, right? Because my family, they drink. So anyway, so I go and I wake up my grandpa, and I'm like, Grandpa, you got to wake up. Something's going on outside. And so Grandpa comes over the window. He looks outside and he's like, oh my God, call the police, call the police. And so now I'm even more freaked out. So I run and I call the police, and I hear the police come, and he's like, go hide. So I run into my grandma's closet, which is really, really full because my grandma is a total hoarder. But I managed to get in there, and I'm hiding in the closet, and I hear the police coming, and I even hear a helicopter. Like, there's a helicopter overhead. Like, that's how big the situation is. The helicopter's moving around, and there's sirens, and my grandpa's out there, and I'm hiding in the closet, and then everything just kind of dies down, and Grandpa comes and gets me out of the closet, and he's like, you can come out now. It's okay, cool. And so I'm like, what's going on? But then I see Grandpa outside. He's talking to the drunk guy, like on the lawn. So turns out that this guy, he lives just like a couple houses over from us. And he got so drunk that he thought our house was his house. And he tried to come into his own house. Classic.
Okay, so this story happened to me when I was a kid. I was about 9, 10, 11, and I was a really cool kid, so I would do cool kid stuff. Late at night, one night, I was staying up because I'm a cool kid while everyone else had gone to sleep. And I heard something outside my window, and so I go to investigate. And there is this guy outside of my window, and he's like stumbling around and stuff. He appears drunk, and I think he looks drunk because my family were drinkers, and so I kind of make the connection. And so I run and I get my grandpa, and I say, Grandpa, there's this guy outside my window. And my grandpa and we rush to the window, and he looks outside, and he says, call the police, and go get in your grandma's closet. And so I call the police. They sent a helicopter. There's a helicopter flying around. The police come. It turns into this whole debacle. I'm inside of my grandma's closet, and it is stuffed full of stuff because she's a hoarder. And so I'm tight in there, and eventually things die down. I don't hear, like police sounds. And so I go outside. And leave the closet, and I see my grandpa outside talking to the guy. And it turns out that the guy was just super drunk. And he was he lives a few houses down, and he thought our house was his house. And so he was trying to enter our house thinking it was his house. Whereas he was just wasted. Classic!
Hey, so this story takes me back to when I was, I guess, 8, maybe I was 9. I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but this is back when I was a kid. And, back then, we thought we were super cool as young children. We didn't see how the world worked yet. And staying up late at night, coolest thing in the world. So one night, there I am in bed, staying up, feeling like I've got everything under control. And then I see this face in the window, like right there, my bedroom window. There's just this guy, just like there, staring, like not right at me, but staring through me, right into the room. So I freak the heck out. I run out of my bedroom and I'm like, Grandpa, because I was staying at his place at the time. Long story. I'm like, there's like a guy outside. And he's like, oh, okay. You know what? I'm going to get my gun. You get in the closet. We had a process, he's one of them types, right? So he's like, I'm going to go take a look. You hide in your closet. So I'm pushing through stuffed animals and some old laundry. I'm there in the dark closet while my grandpa goes outside to figure out what's up with this guy. And in my mind, I'm playing it back. This guy was staring was he sleepwalking? Is he a zombie? I don't know what the situation is, but my grandfather, I can hear him on the phone. He's calling the cops. And then pretty soon, I'm hearing a helicopter overhead. I don't know what's going on, but after what felt like an eternity of just there in the closet and not knowing what was happening, things are real quiet. So I crawl out from under my dirty laundry, crawl out from under my big teddy bear that I had at the time, and I walk out, and the house is just empty. My grandpa is nowhere. I go out onto the front porch, and there he is out in the front yard talking to this guy. Like, cops apparently must have come and gone. And my grandpa doesn't seem worried at all. He's just chatting up a storm with this fella. Turns out, the guy was drunk off his ass and was just wandering around the neighborhood trying to figure out where his house was. He lived about 3 doors down. Not somebody we knew because he was just far enough down the street. He was not, one of the regular folks in the neighborhood. But at any rate, he's drunk off his ass trying to figure out where he lives. So he must have had quite a night. But I'll tell you what, gave me a scare, and I didn't feel like I was so cool after that.
Okay, so the story I'm gonna tell today, it happened to me when I was around 8 or 9. The details I can remember very well. They're a little bit fuzzy right now. But when I was around 8 or 9, I thought staying up late at night was super cool. Was the coolest thing ever. So it was one of those nights I was gonna just stay up all night, and I was living at my grandfather's house at the time, right? So I was, minding my own business, taking my time in my bedroom until, it became later and at night, and I saw this thing on the window, and I started looking at it, trying to decipher what it was, and it was a person. The face of a person was looking at me straight from the window, and I got terrified. This person was looking at me, but wasn't really looking at me. He was looking through me, like through the room, and he was just blankly staring. I got terrified. I went back. I woke up my grandfather, and he was in the midst of the sleep and waking up and saying, "Okay, you go hide in the closet, and I'll grab the shotgun," because we had a process for moments like this. So I went back into the closet where I had a giant plushie, and I went behind that plushie, and I just sat there, closed the closet until things, whatever happened. So I started hearing some sounds. I heard the phone, calling, my grandfather talking to the police, and all these sounds, and slowly, I heard police sirens coming to the house, and I started to hear a helicopter, flying over the house, and after, 40 minutes or an hour, the noise stopped completely, and it was completely silent. So I slowly crawled off the closet, past my giant plushie, and I started walking to the front of my house because I couldn't find my grandfather anywhere in the house. So when I opened the front door, I saw just my grandfather and this man, the man that was outside the window. They were talking to each other, and like it was a common thing, like the most normal thing in the world, just chatting. So I guess the cops must have come and left, and later my grandfather, he came back into the house and told me that the man was completely drunk. He couldn't understand anything of what was happening, and he was just looking at every house to see, to remember which one was his house, because he couldn't pin out exactly which of those houses was his. So needless to say, staying up so late wasn't cool for me anymore.
Hey guys, I'm here to tell you a little story about when I was 8 years old, and this lasted up until I was 12 or more. So it was a long time ago, and it happened for a while. My parents used to get drunk in the garage and throw house parties, and there was a lot of drinking and smoking and dancing and whoop whoop. But then the next day there would be a lot of yelling and throwing and cussing. It was awesome. Yeah. No, it wasn't. It was traumatizing. It's terrible. If you have children, do not do these things. That's what I have to say about that. I also want to tell you that it's one of the reasons I'm now in recovery. 3 years I've been sober, and it's probably one of the reasons that I am also bipolar. No, I was born bipolar, but regardless, I'm dual diagnosis. I'm in recovery, and I'm grateful. My life is good. It's better and better. What happened to me in the past is who I am today, so not a big deal. Anyway, I've been thinking about getting drunk lately, but I choose not to because I don't want to wake up and start yelling and cussing and screaming and throwing things. Well, hope you'll have a great day. Thank you.
Okay, so this story is absolutely true. It's absolutely true. When I was about 8 years old and I was a kid, my mother and father used to have these crazy parties down in the basement. And there'd be a lot of music, and there'd be a lot of dancing. There'd be a lot of drinks, a lot of alcohol. They smoked a lot of weed, these crazy parties. And I'd listen to it as a kid. I'd be upstairs listening, and it just sounded great, and I thought one day that's what I want to do. But the next day, it was awful. There was a lot of screaming and cussing and yelling and, you're a bitch and you suck, and people throwing things and plates breaking, and it was awful. Horrible. And this went on from when I was about 8 until I was about 12 or 13. And I just realized, God, that's horrible, But when I got old enough, I started throwing parties like that. And we would drink and margaritas and shots and smoke weed and smoke blunts and just go crazy. We'd go crazy. And then the next day, the same thing would happen to me. There'd be yelling and screaming and cussing and throwing things and breaking things and just awful, just awful. So, don't let your kids do this. Don't let your kids do that. Don't. It's very traumatizing. I was traumatized. I'm still traumatized. I think that's part of the reason I'm bipolar, which is no picnic in itself. It's really difficult to deal with. I have good days and I have really bad days. So like the trauma, I was traumatized, and I'm bipolar. And with everything that's going on these days, I just really have this giant urge to drink and smoke pot and just go crazy. But I'm not going to do it. It's just too traumatic, and that's it. Just don't do it. It's too traumatic. That's my story.
Hey, so I gotta tell you something. This story, it is absolutely true. It is just, it is so true. It is nothing but the truth. Cross my heart, hope to die. Don't stick a needle in my eye, because that's just, we're friends. You wouldn't do that shit to me. Anyway, point being, the story that I'm about to tell you is so fucking true. It's so true. Didn't use any curse words there, because I'm on a vow not to do any more of those. Anyway, this was, this is like from when I was like 8 years old, 8 years old. And, when I was 8 years old, my parents, they used to throw tons of parties, right? Like your parents throw parties. My parents do tons of parties. And they'd always be in the basement, you know what I'm saying? Like, in the basement, and like, I'd be upstairs, I could hear them, there was a lot of alcohol, there was a lot of dope smoking, they were smoking a lot of weed, I did. They were smoking a lot of weed, and they were like, they were just partying it up, and I could hear it from upstairs. It sounded so fun. I just, it was just like the coolest thing. I thought my parents were just the coolest thing. And so, I thought to myself, when I grow up, I want to have parties just like that, just to be just like them. I missed a spot. And, but the weird thing was, like, the day after was very not fun. The day after always sucked. Like, there'd always be like yelling and screaming and dishes being thrown around, and it's just miserable. Just a lot of anger and everything. And so, I don't know. You take the good with the bad. And so I grew up and like came true. I had a lot of parties. Me and my friends, we would always be like, we'd be drinking. We drank everything we could get our hands on. We'd put it all together in a blender, whatever. We'd be smoking everything we could get our hands on. I smoked catnip one time, swear to God. And and then, the thing was, it was always like that the next day too, like it used to be with my parents. And I got to experience that firsthand with like the yelling and the screaming and throwing plates and dishes and just anger, and it was all messed up. And anyway, the point of this story, I mean, this happened from like when I was 8 to when I was 12 when I was a kid, and then as an adult. But the point is, don't do that. Don't let your kids do that. Just don't. It's not worth it. Just say no. And I never thought I'd quote Nancy Reagan or any of those Republicans. Just say no. That's my story.
Okay, so here's my story. And this is true. It is true. I swear to God that it is true. It's so fucking true. Oh, wait, no, I'm not supposed to be cussing. I said I wasn't gonna do that anymore. Anyway, that shit is really true. Okay, so this happened when I was a kid, and my parents used to have these parties, and they were so awesome. Like, I just thought my parents were just as cool as shit. They were just so cool. And so they'd be having these parties down in the basement, and I would be up in the upstairs, but I could still hear them. And they'd be drinking, and they'd be smoking, and they'd be doing dope and weed, and I could hear what was going on, and it just sounded like so much fun. And I just like, this just sounds awesome. Like, I just totally wanted to be in on it. And I just thought my parents were just the coolest people ever. Like, they were just so fucking cool. And so, but the next day, it just wasn't that great. Like, there would be all this anger and yelling and screaming and throwing dishes. And it was really awful. So, you take the good with the bad, I guess. This kind of went on, from the time I was 12 until I was 8 until I was about 12. But as an adult, like when I was a teenager, when I got older, I had my own parties because I thought this was totally cool. And so I would go out with my friends, and we would be drinking, and we would be smoking, and we'd be doing drugs, and we're just having a great time and just party. And then, the next day it would be the same thing. It would be just all this anger and throwing dishes and just horrible. It was just really bad. And so it was just like, when my parents, after their parties, it was the same shit. And so, the point of the story is this. Don't do that shit. Don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to your kids. Don't let your kids do it. Just say no. I never thought that I would be quoting Nancy Reagan or any of those Republicans, but I am. I'm just gonna say it. Just say no. Just don't do it.
Well, howdy, folks. I got a story to tell you. And this is a true story, too. This is none of them bullshit lies I was telling you before. And this is a true goddamn story. Anyway, so Mom and Daddy, when I was growing up as a little kid, I think they must have been celebrities or something like that, because they used to have all kinds of parties and all kinds of friends come over and everything, people I'd never seen before, and they was drinking and they was smoking, not them cigarettes, no, I was thinking maybe some wacky weed or, man, just lines and lines of cocaine everywhere and orgies all day and night and everything. But Mama, ooh, you didn't want to be around Mama the next day. Oh, God dang, when she started throwing dishes in the kitchen, you didn't want to be anywhere around the kitchen. And Daddy had to get a second job because he had to buy all them dishes for Mama to throw in there. And so years and years and years it would go on, just orgies and cocaine, and all kinds of drinking and smoke. And it was so, and I thought, man, I want to be like just Mom and Daddy because they're so cool. They're so popular. Everybody just loves Mama and Daddy. Sure shit. When I was 20, I had all these friends and people I didn't even know coming over, and they was doing cocaine and orgies day and night. And I had to get a second job and a third job just to buy all them dishes because I was destroying so many dishes too. And then one day I just saw Nancy Reagan came on the television and she said, "Don't you do them drugs." And I said, "Who the fuck are you, Nancy? You should probably do some drugs yourself, you dumb bitch." Anyways, so that's my story.
True story. When I was a kid, I thought my parents were famous. I mean, seriously, I thought they were celebrities because I grew up around parties. We had parties all the time on the weekends, and there'd be booze everywhere and drugs and cocaine, just cocaine everywhere. And it was all fun, and Mom and Dad had a blast, their friends had a blast. But then when my mom would come down, oh, she would get in a mood, like just get angry, so angry that she would just throw plates, just break plates. And it got to the point where my dad ended up having to get a second job, not because we were going through blow and booze, because we were going through plates. We needed plates. But still, everyone had a really good time, and it's a fun way to grow up. And, I thought, well, when I get older, I want to be just like my mom and dad. So when I'm about 20, I'm having parties and realize that I was like my mom, because coming down the next day or so, I would get so angry, I would break plates. And not only did I have to get a second job, I had to get a third job, I had to get a fourth job to replace the plates. And so one day I'm watching TV and there's Nancy Reagan on the television and she's saying, "Don't do drugs." And at first I'm like, hey, why don't you mind your own damn business? Don't tell me what to do. And then it was, I bet if she did drugs, she would lighten up a little bit and be a lot more fun. So that's my story, and it's all true.
So stupid.
That's it. That's it. So stupid.
So dumb.
Classic.
After that,
Staying up so late wasn't cool for me anymore.
Thank you.
And that's my story.
That's my story.
Just don't do it.
That's my story.
And it's all true.